People who have taken revenge on their blackmailers. How did you manage to do it? It all started about 3 years ago. My cousin wanted to have a professional, candid photo shoot. She thought it would be a good idea to capture these photos while she was at the peak of her beauty. She mulled over the idea for a couple of years and finally decided to go for it. She started looking for a photographer and settled on someone who charged $300 per hour and agreed to do a candid photo shoot. When she asked if he had any agreement or document guaranteeing that he wouldn't distribute her photos, he said no. She proposed signing an agreement stating that he had no right to keep her photos on his devices and had to give her the SD card, making her the only person with access to the images. He agreed but insisted that she buy the SD card herself. She complied. They signed the agreement, did the photo shoot, and he edited the photos. She received the SD card with the images, and everything seemed to go well, at least, that's what my cousin thought. About 6 months after the photo shoot, the photographer contacted her and said he had copies of her photos and knew a website where he could sell them for $500. If she didn't want him to do that, she had to pay him $500. She called me and asked what she could do, knowing I'm good at finding solutions to tricky situations. I looked into it and concluded that his actions were illegal. I advised my cousin to do the following: under no circumstances should she pay him, because if she paid once, there was no guarantee he wouldn't demand money again and again. I told her to remind him that blackmail is a criminal offense, that they had signed a document stating he couldn't keep copies of her photos or publish them anywhere, and to warn him that if he published the photos, she would leave reviews about him on all social media platforms, ruining his reputation. I thought that would be the end of the story, but about 6 months later, I saw a photo of my cousin in a very revealing pose on a certain subreddit. I recognized her because of a tattoo on her body with her son's name and birthdate. I told her about it and sent her the link. I researched how to get websites to remove content and sent takedown notices to all the sites where I found her photos posted. I went to a forum to seek advice about the situation, and someone sent me a lawyer's contact information in a private message. I called him and explained everything. The lawyer told me that since I wasn't the victim, he couldn't take any action until the victim, my cousin, contacted him herself. I went to her, told her about the lawyer, and advised her to reach out to him. But my cousin has one flaw: she forgives too quickly. I tried to convince her as best I could, but she decided that negative reviews and spreading information about the photographer on social media were, in her opinion, sufficient punishment for him. Another 6 months passed, and my cousin called me again, saying, "Guess which jerk just emailed me?" I'm quick on my feet, so I replied, "The photographer?" She said, "Yup." I asked how much he was demanding this time. She said he was asking for $10,000 to delete her photos and as compensation for the damage she had caused his business. Apparently, his client base had dwindled when people found out he was selling clients' photos without permission, despite them already paying for the photo shoots. I told her it was time to call the lawyer. She agreed. A year later, the photographer spent a fortune on a lawyer to defend him in court but ultimately lost. My cousin won the blackmail case, sued the guy, and was awarded substantial compensation. He's now serving a 3-year sentence in an Arizona state prison. Of course, when she sued him, he quickly sold everything he owned to pay for his lawyer because he didn't want to go to prison. So, she won't get her compensation anytime soon, but all his future earnings will go to her. I own a hair salon in a small town, and many of my regular clients have become friends. I've known one client, Ali, for almost 3 years, and we've grown quite close. 2 days ago, she came to my salon nearly in tears. Some time ago, she had a falling out with her husband, and they even considered divorce. While they were living apart, she started chatting on Facebook with a man she had never met in real life. They began messaging, and later she started sending him intimate photos. Over time, he began acting as if he had some claim over her, even though they had never met in person. He knew about her issues with her husband and was extremely jealous of him. A few days ago, Ali found out she was pregnant, so she and her husband decided to put their differences aside and stay together for the sake of their kids. They have 2 daughters, the youngest being 6. Everyone was thrilled about the news, except for her Facebook friend. When Ali told him they could no longer communicate, he got angry and started threatening to tell her husband about their spicy correspondence, even though nothing had actually happened between them. He said he would at least humiliate her and, if he couldn't destroy her marriage, he aimed to ruin the life of a pregnant woman and her family, all because he believed he had some claim over her just because she sent him photos of her breasts. That's when I decided to step in. It turned out we went to the same school, though I didn't remember him at all. He was one of my Facebook friends. Ali just wanted me to flirt with him a bit to distract him from her. At first, I sent innocent messages like, "Your face looks familiar, but I can't recall your name, cutie." He wasn't cute at all. I started flirting with him to convince him to send me explicit photos. At first, he sent me a close-up photo of his hose, but I wrote back, "How do I know you didn't just download this from the internet? I want to see your face." I told him I was at work and couldn't send him my photo, but that the thought of looking at his explicit photos while surrounded by people who didn't know turned me on. In reality, we were all gathered around my phone, laughing our heads off at this selfish misogynist. By the evening, I had received a ton of his explicit photos, including some classic ones of him polishing the pole. Today, he's supposed to come to my salon, or we'll give him an ultimatum. I've saved all his messages and will publish them if he doesn't leave my friend alone. Do you think I'm a bad person? When I was 19, I worked at a small store near my home. Of course, there were plenty of rude customers, but there were also many nice regulars I got along well with. Unfortunately, the story I want to tell isn't about the nice customers but about a creepy older man in his 40s. He was very unpleasant and strange. The store didn't have a panic button, and he often came in when I was alone. This creep only came to harass me. He would lean over the counter, touch my hands, say disgusting, vulgar things, and try to grope me whenever I stepped out from behind the counter. I hated my job because of him. I complained to the manager multiple times, but he did nothing. One day, this man said particularly vile things and tried to grab my chest. I couldn't take it anymore, pushed him away, told him to get out of the store, and threatened to call the police if he didn't leave. He laughed and said I wouldn't be able to prove anything. Then I pointed to the cameras. That made him angry, and he said he knew where I lived and that if I went to the police, I'd end up in the hospital. He left, but I was terrified. On my next shift, I was very nervous. The manager was cashing out the register at the time. He saw me and asked what was wrong, so I told him everything. I said I wanted to report the man to the police and needed evidence, recordings from the cameras. The manager replied, "Sorry, but I'm afraid you can't do that. If you go to the police, they'll start asking about you, and I'll have to tell them everything I know." That scared me even more. The manager was my friend and had helped me get the job. He knew I had some legal issues, and he was essentially threatening to tell the police about them, which would have caused a rift in my family. He added, "I value you as a friend, but I saw your true character when you refused to go on a date with me. I have to be honest with the police. Or maybe you'd like to go on a date with me in exchange for the camera recordings?" He had asked me out a few times, but I had turned him down and didn't think much of it. Unfortunately, that backfired, and he resorted to blackmail. Although I was terrified of the creepy man and didn't want trouble with the police, I wasn't going to date the manager just to get the recordings. So, I decided to get revenge. The regional manager was a friend of my manager and turned a blind eye to issues during inspections. But I heard rumors that the regional manager was being transferred, meaning a new one would take his place and conduct an inspection. Knowing this, I waited patiently. One day, I came to work and saw an unfamiliar man. It was the new regional manager, and he was there for an inspection while our manager was absent. He said he wanted to observe my daily work, so I deliberately did everything poorly under his watch. I messed up at every opportunity, scanned items incorrectly, didn't check their codes, and misplaced products on the shelves. The regional manager was horrified and asked if I had been trained. I told him the truth, that I hadn't. He pulled out my file, which had my signature stating I had completed training. Fortunately, my dad had taught me to document everything I did at work, so I was able to tell him the day I started and the day I signed the document, saying the manager had just given me the papers and told me to sign. I added that this could be seen on the camera recordings. Of course, the regional manager checked the footage. As a result, he sat me down and asked me to tell him about other violations by the manager that he wasn't aware of. I told him everything, how he made me and my colleague come to work early and finish his shifts so he could leave earlier, how he delayed signing our vacation requests until it was too late, and about other violations, including how he never addressed our complaints and begged us not to report incidents. He asked what kind of incidents I was talking about, and I told him about the creepy customer and how the manager blackmailed me to prevent me from going to the police. The regional manager was furious and asked if I could provide dates to prove it was all true. I gave him the dates and said I felt uncomfortable reporting all this because I didn't want anyone to get in trouble. A lie, of course, I wanted it to happen. I don't know what happened next, but our manager soon stopped showing up to work, and a new one was appointed in his place. I asked what happened to the old manager, and they told me he had been fired. Apparently, he was called in by the higher-ups, thinking it was about something minor, but it turned out to be very serious. He was fired not only for what he did to me but also because it came to light that he was falsifying reports and logging extra work hours, stealing money from the store. Shortly after, I quit, but I had a great relationship with the new manager. I also moved to a different area and never saw that creep again. The old manager never said anything to me directly, but I heard he claimed I made it all up and called me malicious. Well, at least in that regard, he wasn't lying. I really am malicious. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new, super interesting discussions. In the meantime, we suggest checking out our other videos.